We are in, for those of you who are international, we are a unit, Center of Learning and Teaching in a former Christian College University of Pakistan in Lahore. We are very, very happy to sort of reach out and connect from so many of you, many from all parts of Pakistan, from 300 campuses across Pakistan. And then there are many, many more. We had nearly 14,000 registrations, of which 11,000 plus are national. And there's another 2,000 that are international from 107 countries of the world. And the regions are like Asia, Africa, Australia, North America, South America, and New Zealand, Middle East, Europe. And we are very, very honored with all that sort of credibility of our course. And I must again say that the credibility of a course comes from the experts who are conducting those sessions. As you have seen, the course is built around to be as wholesome as possible for research and development skills, and we base it on the structure of Vitae. We also are very mindful that to divide the research course in different modules. At present, there are some modules around introduction where AI and research was a new addition. And we have then library search, we have literature review and research ethics. Then we have a lot of sessions of research methodology. Then we have quite a few other sessions on tools for research. Then we go into writing skills, which is very, very important. And they are by disciplines. And then, of course, some general for publishing and grant writing and so on. There are some others. So we have tried to build a wholesome course that gives you the right skills to think like a researcher. So I would like to now introduce to a very powerful expert of today. She is Professor Ina Fury. Have I pronounced it rightly, Ina? And you just retired from the University of Pretoria, right? And you were the chair, you are the professor and chair of School of Information Technology at the university in South Africa. You started your professional career as a librarian at the Atomic Energy Corporation of South Africa, and then you began your academic career at the University of South Africa, which is a distance education university. And you spent a lot of, I think, nearly 12 years at that university before moving into University of South Africa, Pretoria, University of Pretoria. And here you have very quickly went through the different stages of promotion and retired now recently as a chair. You supervise, you teach, have been teaching, you are an active member of professional bodies, you have also are on editorial boards of many journals, you review for journals, you review for the National Research Foundation, and then of course you are a like us, we were lucky to have you, many others, invitations, and you collaborate with researchers from all parts of the world. I cannot say enough how lucky we are to have you. And as you can see that right now we are closing to the 1,000 mark, but live stream will sort of get functional. And so welcome once again, and over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction and also for inviting me. This is a big privilege to be part of this absolutely stunning, amazing initiative, and that being very, very well organized. So today I'm going to take you through something which I'm very passionate about, and that is searching the literature. I will give an introduction and point out some things with regarding to it being iterative, and so forth. You can look at this. And then I will pace myself so that there's about 10 minutes or so towards the end for you to ask questions. So if I do not cover every piece of detail in the slides, that is the reason, and you can look at it in your own time. I want to start.
May I sort of just saying that you could perhaps save some of the time for on literature review per se. I know searching for
Mm,
literature is what we are doing. So if you
mm,
have some information, keep it additional for people to ask, because we have a separate session on engaging with the text, which is literature review, just trying to clarify.
mm.
In
No,
case,
that is true. As I said, my focus and my passion is searching the literature, and
absolutely.
I have loved this since 1982 when I completed my degrees. Okay, my first job, as you heard, was at the Atomic Energy Corporation, where I searched literature on nucleosides. That was in the very early days of online searching when it was very expensive. I'm not going to go into detail, but if you read the textbooks from that time, and I list some at the end of the slides, you'll get the feeling of how to plan it to get exactly what you want. But things have changed. The internet brought us the opportunity to not pay for everything if your university subscribed to the databases and so forth. So you can spend time browsing and looking around. And from my background, I have read a lot on this. And I come to you with absolute passion about this thing, and I will unpack it in the slides to come. There's a book that I want to bring to your attention, and the purpose is not to market the book, but it is one where I'm the co-author. It's interactive since the sixth edition. And you're welcome to go and check it out on the internet and see, because there all of these detailed things are unpacked with exercises and so forth. But let me move on. If there's one thing that I want you to take home today, it is that every moment that you spend on searching the literature is crucial and worthwhile, because that determines the success of your work. We are keen to start writing and putting our ideas on paper, but spend the time on searching, going back. And it's not that you search now and you've got the literature and then you just stick to it. You go back time and again as you make statements, as you find something that you want to. So that is the mindset that I want you to take. It's ongoing. It is amazing to have the privilege of having access to sources. Compare that with early days when only a few people could afford that. So I would call on you, regardless of whether you're doing an assignment, a master's, a doctoral, a conference paper, a research article, spend the time and do this properly. And you'll also see it is not that hard. In my education, my degree, I had one 50-minute lecture where somebody explained Boolean operators and truncation to me and databases, and that was it. So invest your time in, because this determines your success. And explore as much as you can. And maybe you think, okay, I'm wasting an hour or two. Compare that with how much you waste if your work is rejected. If your article, your paper is rejected because you didn't consult the literature properly, apply the techniques, change them, because you're not paying more for using different options when searching databases or the internet. Or so it's just your little bit of time. And then once you have a lot, you are selective. You select the very best from that, and I will get to that as well. And then you start writing, because you have the privilege of reading what others have said. And if you give yourself enough time, that becomes easier. You want your project to be the best possible. And as I said, sometimes getting hold of the full text articles, books, and so on might be problematic depending on your universities and where you are positioned. But we're living in a world where that is also becoming easier and it's possible. But the big thing I want you to remember, it is iterative. You change, you go on each and every day. When I write an article, I have the literature, and many times I go back and I search for something briefly. So this slide is what I want you to remember. The success depends on your time, your effort, identifying literature from your searches, and you can only do that if you've really opened your mind and searched and applied certain things, applying your thinking skills, and then type it out And remember, the people who evaluate your work, regardless of whether it's your lecturer, supervisors, external examiners, the reviewers for articles or conference papers, they know the literature. So you can't fool them. So it's worth your while putting in this. Just this slide. It's widely cited. If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. You have the privilege of reading what others have said. And then you step away and you come up with your own brilliant, bright ideas. But that is for other people to tell you how to review the literature. You repeat it numerous times, and you do it, for example, at the start. Assignment, you get the topic with master's, doctoral, you identify the topic. And you maybe have one idea, and you look at the literature and you see there's too much or there's too little, and you slightly slant it. So start off broad concepts, search. Depending on what you are getting, you might change it slightly. Search extensively to see which scholarly sources are available. There's a lot. So you can pick and you can choose what you want to do. As you progress, you come across terms and you want a definition. And for some of these things, for your extensive review search, the databases would be a good option, library catalog and so on, repositories, what you have. But for some things, you might decide to dip into Wikipedia or something else to get definitions, and then you always go back to the articles, the books, where you can find the original. So searching for different theories that you are using. For more literature on that theory, once you've identified what you're going to use. It's very important when you make a statement. That statement is true according to common sense, but people expect it to be substantiated from the literature. Then you take that and you dip quickly into, I often for this kind of thing use Google Scholar or very broadly searching in title fields. And I find a good reference, and I do not just type that out. I go and I look at the article and see what I can get. On the methodology, it's very important, save your strategies and set up an alert so that you are notified when there are new literature on your field. Especially important if you're doing master's or doctoral degrees over several years. You must update it. E-libraries are making this easier. The internet is making it easier. Open access scholarly journals. So the ideal world is to have a library subscribing to the full scope of databases available and full text of e-journals and full text of electronic books and so forth. We don't always have that. And then we adapt. We make the best of what we can find access to. At this stage, I want to bring in artificial intelligence as a support throughout the process. And you can use it in various ways to just trigger your ideas. Don't accept everything that is there, but you'll get the hang and feel of what will work. The one that I normally use is just ChatGPT, and for things like this. If you want to search the literature, you need to use the right words, the right vocabulary, and I'll get to that. You need to search the databases and other search tools. Ask a tool such as ChatGPT for suggestions and look at that. Apply your mind and again, repeat your search, your questions, because depending on how you slant it, you get different answers. And once you dip into this, you'll get the hang of it. But when you get references or words, also go and just double check that. Okay? I'm using the term here, scanning the horizon of information resources. It's something that I got from work by Diane Sonnenveld, an expert in information behavior, and she used it as part of research methods, determining what sources people are using. But I want to put it out here that if you really want to be successful, expand the horizon of different types of sources that you are using for different things. Using Wikipedia to get an orientation, not to support all your statements, but get a feel of the vocabulary. And again, there are so many, and I'm citing some of the sources here that you can consider. And never forget the power of people. Talking to fellow students, talking to colleagues, getting ideas because we are coming from different disciplines and different experiences, and we know different words. And remember, the words that you use determine what you are going to find when you dip into these sources. As I said, I got this from the work of Diane Sonnenwald. There are some examples that you can consider. I'm not going to read them all. Libraries, the sources that they subscribe to, and again, these things are very, very expensive. And some libraries has got good collections, and some are less privileged. And then you have to come up with other ways. Um, Sometimes there are librarians, information specialists, some of them who compile what they call library guides. I've seen a library in South Africa, and it's not my own, with a stunning list of books on research methods, organized very well. So why on earth would you struggle and try and figure to find a good one when you can go to that list and you can see, wow, these are the good ones? Because if you use the wrong literature, you get the wrong information and everything turns out and it can be wrong. Your whole study can be directed in the wrong way. And yes, you have a supervisor, advisor who try and correct you, but that can slow down your processes. See if you can find the full text by just clicking a button. But if it is not, then you use other methods of identifying these sources and try and get hold of this. So we want it to be as convenient as possible, but if it's not, then second best. This is actually something very complicated, analyzing and unpacking the research topic, and I'm just scanning over it very briefly. It is on the one hand scary, but don't overcomplicate it. Think of what is your topic and break that into core concepts. I've taken here, for example, information behavior of cancer patients in South Africa. And then I said core concepts, information behavior, and everything that entails. And I said cancer patients and everything that entails. I didn't include South Africa here. Yes, you can combine the three concepts, but most probably you'll not get a lot of literature. So you don't need to, you can try, search quickly, but don't then say, oh, there's nothing in South Africa, now I have to do something else. You drop the South Africa. So, and again, you can play around and then look for other studies about information behavior in South Africa. So the success of searching is also lying in common sense. The fact that you can combine all three concepts doesn't mean that you always have to apply it like that. And throughout, remember I said it's not just a once-off search. As you move on, you come up with different information, you change the way that you are thinking, you go back and you search again. So, and because you are not paying more money every time you are searching the sources, it's just your time. The one thing that I want to emphasize, and this is a personal preference, and I hope that other advisors, supervisors, academics will support me in this. If you write something and you refer to research methods, you write about that. Use the core textbooks that has been written, that is highly respected. There are numerous ones. Rather than an obscure article where somebody write about that and maybe the interpretation is not quite right. So for something like this, you would maybe go to the library catalog and search for textbooks on this. So apply your minds when searching the literature. So the concepts, as I said, will depend, but you have to identify what you are looking for, but don't, it is possible, the systems allow you to combine them as precisely as possible, but then you are missing information. Remember, the people who published articles did not do it according to the way that you want to approach the topic. So you take different slants. One of the most important things when you're searching literature is to find the right words. In South Africa, we, for example, use British spelling and British vocabulary. In your topic, you have to think of all of the synonyms. Information behavior, for example, has got the British spelling and the American spelling. It includes information seeking, information searching, information sharing, information avoidance, literature searching. You need to identify all of the ones that are relevant, because that will determine what you're going to find. You look at spelling variations, and sometimes you will not realize that the term is spelled differently. Because you're not using that term that often, okay? And maybe, for example, I've published something on the great digital divide. And I spelled it the one way, I think with an E, and only way into my searching, I realized it can also be spelled with an A. So I went back. But it makes sure that you find, because the articles, the books, the authors are using their words, their vocabulary. And when you want to find that, you have to use the same. You have to guess. And there are so many sources that can help you to guess. Wikipedia, something like ChatGPT can help you. Also, when you search for something, you look at the abstract and the title and you see which other words can I use to make sure that I find more literature that is really good. So the emphasis is not on finding more, it is on making sure that you find as much as possible of the stuff that is really, really good and useful for your study. Think about older terminology and buzzwords. So again, you spend time, depending on your topic, figuring out the latest words. In other words, when I search artificial intelligence, will I just use AI, or will I use ChatGPT, or will I bother to look up some of the other? I've done research on children's cancers and information behavior. I had to go and look up the names of the cancers that apply to children. And some of them I can't even pronounce. I spent time. So language of the search tool, in other words, I assume I'm presenting this to you as searching English sources, but it will depend on your country. There might be language publications, databases in your language. The order of the words. Remember, the system most often search exactly the way that you put it. They are sometimes allowing you sort of to switch the order. Literature searching, searching literature. The same thing, but how you put it, phrases. Searching for phrases, especially if you use Google Scholar and other internet search tools, you can specify the phrase, and it's possible to be very, very specific. But if you are too specific, you might lose certain things. So spend time on playing around with this until you are sure and confident that you've got what you need. And as I said, there are sources like AI, Wikipedia, search engines. Dip into that and get a feel of the terminology. When you plan it, you, and this has been around since the very early days of literature searching, your Boolean operators. These are words, symbols that you use to say that you would like to combine two different things, or three different things, or four different things. They often use the circles that you'll find in maths to say that if you use and, you only get the intersection of things, okay? It seems straightforward, but experience has shown that people also found that very confusing. So the way that I want to explain it here is to say, if you combine two things with and, you are getting less, more specific. Now, this is contrary to what you have in everyday life. If you walk into a cafe or restaurant and you say, I would like to have a cup of coffee and a slice of cake, what do you get? You get a cup of coffee and you get your lovely slice of cake. if you are searching the databases and you say coffee and cake, it will be a cake made of coffee. Okay, the two must be together. So go and write out a couple of examples for yourself. And then maybe you'll remember this. And the more you say with and, the more exactly it can be. You can have cake and coffee and almonds and cranberries and recipe, and you'll maybe get then one or two recipes with exactly that. So you can combine a good number of terms, but the more specific you are, the less information you are going to give. And sometimes if you're looking for a specific statement or something that word, but if I'm searching for information on my topic, over all the literature, I would not be as precise as that. So remember, coffee and cake. In a restaurant, you get two. In Boolean searching databases, you get them only when combined. Now we get to or. Or means if you say, somebody asks you, would you like coffee or tea? You're going to get one of them. Boolean, coffee or tea, you get your cup of coffee, you get your cup of tea, or a glass of water, you get them all. So the more you or, the more you get all of them on your table. Years ago, I did book reviews for somebody, and I would say, I would be happy to review this title or this title or this title. What happens? I get a partial delivered with 6 books. So I said, this is not the Boolean or, okay? It's either the one or the other. So again, work this out for yourself with your own examples, and then you will remember. The more you combine with or, the better your chances of finding all the possibilities, because remember, you need to use the words that the author has written and the way that they have described it, or you miss it. And also that is why I've said you find the literature, you start reading and you find, okay, maybe I should have searched a little bit different. You don't close your eyes and pretend you didn't notice that. You go back and you search again. Because that effort makes that you have a good end product by standing on the shoulders of giants and reading their works, their research. So play around with or is especially important to combine your synonyms. Information behavior, British spelling, information behavior, American spelling, or information seeking or literature searching, and so forth and so forth, to make sure, because an article on information seeking is considered an article on information behavior, although information behavior is strictly speaking bigger. So that's also why I say will not hurt you to do a little bit of exploratory thinking, searching things like Wikipedia, artificial intelligence tools like ChatGPT and so forth, and also books on a topic to get your ideas of the concept. Not means you do not want that. If you search the library science databases for information ethics, somehow you get a lot of things dealing with engineering students. And maybe that is really not what you want, and then you can safely say not engineering. You can say not this author. Maybe it's your own work, okay. You can do it, but be mindful, because you can also miss out on some information. I'll give you an example just now. So, and the article, the book, the report must be on information behavior and cancer. But can you see now, if I do it like this is the main concepts, you get broad idea of what is available. But it doesn't cater for the different spelling of information behavior, information seeking, searching, not different types of cancer and so forth. I can have behavior and cancer and Africa. And I can maybe sort of say, I want to be more specific. There's a lot about this. I want to know, understand the information behavior of patients in hospitals. But Again, please note, I've now said I want to understand the information behavior of patients, but patients are not a concept here because my assumption is that most of the literature will be about patients. But some of that will then also be about maybe the family members, or it will be of the doctors or nurses. So you can say, do you want to add patients, or do you want to keep it like that and then just ignore those that you don't want? And sometimes those that you don't want is actually good for your research to say, there has been a lot published on patients, but hardly anything about oncologists and so forth. So don't shy away of spending an extra second scanning something that you did not really want or need, because that can trigger ideas. That is my approach. So the system allows you to be extremely specific. Try various combinations and remember to add the synonyms and spelling variations. And in the early days when I was trained as a student and early days when I lectured, we had the dialogue system where you could be extremely precise in doing these things because it was for information professionals. You were trained to use the command language. Nowadays, you sometimes have to repeat your search a couple of times because it is easier for people without a lot of training to use him. But go and play around with examples for yourself and see what happens until you feel confident. Now the Boolean or, your synonyms, your related terms, word variations, and I'm giving examples here. Cancer. If the article is about leukemia and there are two different spellings, then you have to specify that. Leukemia is a cancer. But if it's not used in the title and the abstract or so, or as referring to cancer, you will not pick it up, or tumors. Now, tumor can be benign or it can be malignant. And others. So play around, spend extra time identifying the terms that you need to use. Not, you can use it, but be mindful. For example, information behavior and cancer and children, not adults. Because you're not interested in adults, but wow. Now there's a leading world expert who published on a study comparing the behavior of children with that of adults. Gone, you will not see that one. So ask yourself, how hard will it be on you to look at a little bit more? Because what do you see? Remember, you're not reading the article or the book. You do search the databases and other sources, and you get a brief description with the title and the abstract. You don't need to read it. Your eyes are just dropping on it to say, good, good, not, I don't want it or so. So if you spend an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, for me, always worthwhile. And personally, I found it absolutely fascinating because I get ideas of things that can be done, that might be interesting opportunities. But some people experience information overload as totally overwhelming. So figure out what works for you, but bear in mind what you might miss if you, for example, use not and it should not have been used. There's another feature in searching, it's called truncation. Now, different systems use different symbols, either the asterisk or the question mark. It allows you to search on a part of a word. And you can draw yourself a little tree, and the trunk is the part that you then specify. And then everything in the branches, everything coming extra, is what will be retrieved. Because remember, the database system search for the words as it appeared in the bibliographic record or the full text or so forth. Be mindful not to truncate too short. There's a saying, don't truncate 3 and 4 letter words. So if you're searching for cat, you need to allow for the plural as well. Then I would rather type out cat or cats, because otherwise you get a lot of extra things that you're totally not interested. Manage, manages, manager, managers, management. Think of the possibilities. And here a dictionary can come in very handy to make sure that you truncate it correctly. Because if your trunk, your part, your stem that you are using, if you is maybe there's a spelling variation because of different spelling approaches, and you might miss some information. So just spend extra time if it's not your first language to make sure that you've got the terms correctly. But this means that you don't need to type out all of these possibilities, and how you would combine them, if you would type them out, would be with the Boolean or. You want this one, and you want this one, and you want this one, and you want this one. You want a whole plate full of all of the information on these topics. So we've got the Boolean operators that can help us. We've got truncation, and then field searching. And these things has been around since the very, very early days of when databases were made available for searching. I think it go back to the 1960s or so. You can search in a specific field. Title, these are called the subject fields. First of all, you can also search in author and so on, but I'm focusing here on subject fields. Title, keywords or abstracts. Title is the words that the author chose. They are limited, but it's exactly describing the content. Keywords are assigned by the authors or people who are trained and paid by the databases to do the indexing. I used to teach this in the earlier part of my life. So when you assign an indexing term, there should be a reasonable amount of information on that. That is the assumption. The authors write an abstract. And again, sometimes some databases would pay people to rewrite that abstract and to adapt it. And in this book that I've mentioned, I've given an example of my own article that has 3 different versions for 3 different databases. But so if you search obviously in the title keyword abstract, you have got a very good chance to get everything on that topic in that particular source. Remember, no database covers everything on a topic. That's why I say your horizons should be broad and expansive. I very often start by searching in the title field. I know I might be missing things, but for me, it gives me the best start of things that are solidly about the topics that I'm looking at. If I don't find information, then I maybe take one concept in the title and the other one in the abstract. And then I go back and I take the second type concept in the title and the other one, then the first one in the abstract. So play around and try and get as much as possible. As I said, again, if you search only in the title, you are going to miss some of the information, but you should get the most important ones. And that is always where I start, and then, if necessary, I further expand. But other people might give you different advice. You can also obviously search on the name of an author. I'm not going to cover that in the time that I have available. You can also limit your search to the date. Now, many people tell you only the latest information. Depending on your topic, you definitely always need the latest information, but it's sometimes essential to also acknowledge the older work because that is when the original thinking was being done. So personally, I always advise people to make sure that they include the latest, but the older, solid, seminal work must also be there. And quite often you'll find if you read these things, they will go into more detail about the reason behind things and so forth. You can specify, the system allows you to 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, depending on. If you don't specify anything, it search all of them by default. You can specify the language, okay? And this limiting it to a field is also called filtering. You can say you want only the things in English because that is the language that you understand, or I can say English and Afrikaans. But the bottom line is, quite often in the databases that I'm referring to, it is English is the major one, so you'll maybe miss out on you'll have a few less references. And the fact that the article is in Russian or Spanish or French, the abstract and the title is still given in English. And that can give you an idea of maybe a name of a researcher who's prominent on a topic, or give you some ideas of the kinds of research that is done in a specific context. You can limit it to the type of documents, saying, I want only scholarly articles, only books, only conference papers. It depends on what the system, the database that you are searching, allowing you. Look at the options available and don't go overboard to limit it to absolutely everything if it's not really necessary. But if you get too much and it's really too cumbersome, then go back and be more specific. Some of these databases include, for example, newspaper clippings and so forth, and maybe that is not what you have in mind, except, for example, if your purpose is you want to check the first time that a certain term has been used, when the term has been coined, then I would not limit it to a specific kind of document. Different types of searching, you can do a quick, it's called quick and dirty. Just type in information, behavior, and Africa, and you'll get a feel of what there is out there. You can put them in different combinations. Like I've said, maybe the one concept first in the title and the other one in the abstract, if you get nothing or almost nothing, if they're both in the title, and then swap around. Another good trick is to take a concept, if you're, depending on your topic, if there's one concept that is really very unique for that type of databases. Like if you type in prisoners in a library science database, you'll not get a lot of references probably, and then you don't need to combine it with all of the other terms. If you type in prisoners in a legal database, not a good idea, okay. Except if you combine it with others. Let me add that. There's a wonderful article that was written many years ago by Professor Marcia Bates about berry digging search techniques. And I'm giving the reference at the end, and I will strongly advise you to go and check that out. It is touching on many of these things and conveying the principle that I want to share with you, to be iterative, to try again and again, and remember that it's ongoing. Another way to find literature is citation searching. You find an article, for example, if you want to search on grief and bereavement and information behavior, you find one of my articles, and then you can check who I am citing. I use a lot of citations in my work, but you can also see who is citing me. You search for a core person in information behavior, Professor Tom Wilson. Who is citing his work or a specific article? So then it means that you're no longer just focusing on your ability to define the right terms, but on using the author. And again, something like ChatGPT can give you an idea of who are the core authors in the field. Not always perfectly accurate. I will not just rely on that, but it can give you some pointers. And there are databases like Web of Science, where you can specifically do citation searches. There might be others as well. And this is also called citation pearl growing. So you have the one little perfect pearl, and you add another perfect pearl and another and another. Power searching with Google Scholar. Now, I always start with the commercial databases to which the library subscribe. Some of them might be available for free. I know ERIC, the educational database, at some stage, and I haven't tested it now, also the LISTA, Library Information Science Technology Abstracts and so forth. There might be others. That is where I always start. But if you don't have access to them, then you go to Google Scholar. And you type in, you can either type in an exact phrase, you can use your Boolean ands and ors, you can type in exact phrase. And remember, If you are too exact, you might miss a lot because, again, it's looking for the words exactly the way that you are typing it in. For example, grief and bereavement and children in South Africa. How many references are you going to get for that? It's very specific, except the only time that you will use it effectively is when you're looking for a title, for example, of a document. For example, a title of a book that you want to find and you want to cite it. Like Glaser and Strauss has written a book on grief and awareness of grief and bereavement, or awareness of death and dying. You can search in titles. You can do searches for authors. You can search by date. You can say cited by. You can also do an alert to keep aware of things that are published. I'm subscribing to a number of alerts. I'm monitoring some key authors that I'm interested in. I'm monitoring their work. So that even if I'm not actively working on a project, I am getting a notification if they've written a new article or a new publication. And obviously, you can also do this to see when people are citing your own work. I'm not doing it for all of my own articles, just for a book or two. You display your results. And unlike in the olden days, early days of databases, you're not paying extra for this. Early days, you paid for whatever you displayed. So it was very expensive. You had to be very specific. Quick look, the abstracts. I often, when I download it to Citation Manager, so on, I download the abstracts as well because it gives me ideas. And sometimes you can even do the list of references. So depending on how you do it, evaluate. Now, there are many things that you can consider when you evaluate. But the biggest thing is to look for the experts. Certain names must be there. If you write on information behavior, you can either cite Tom Wilson, Rayo Savalainen, Donald Case, Heidi Julien, Lisa Gibbon. But one of those names or similar must be there. Not your friend who completed their master's degree last year. You can cite that as well as an example of the research, but that is not the core. Scholarly journals, reputable publications. There are so many that you can trace. That is where you go. Not obscure things, because that can really hurt you. I've talked about older and more recent. And be very mindful. Sometimes some conferences publish just the abstract in a reputable journal. You can cite that if you're trying to make a certain point. But otherwise, most of those things are not even a page. It doesn't look so good, okay, because it's not in depth. There's a lot more that one can say, but I'm going to conclude here. I believe your time spent is worthwhile. It's the cornerstone of your success. Based on that, you apply your mind. Go back. It doesn't hurt. Time and again. I mean, I'm online all the time. Early days, it was frowned upon if you browsed, because you were supposed to search very analytically, very precise, because it was horribly expensive. Now it is not. Play around and see what you can learn. Okay, so look at the early day books. I'm citing here the article by Marcia Bates. Harter, Stephen Harter, the book is from 1986. Excellent examples and explanations of the theories behind it. I'm also citing something by Diane Sonnenfeld. And then the book, and as I said, I'm not trying to sell the book, okay, but I just want you to go and look for the 6th or the 7th and see how it is structured. And then there's a brand new book, and it's not on the shelves yet, by Professor Gopinda Chowdhury and his wife on AI and information access and formulating your strategies for good searches. And I think that is what I'm going to say. And then there's time for questions, if that's okay.
Thank you so much, Ina. I'm thinking of writing a paper, and it's been a long time, and your sort of PowerPoint has really made me think of the ways I could look to it. What really came across very powerfully was that you have to have a lot of reading also to be able to understand this expanse that the terms you need to search for, because unless you have a very, reading on the topic and on the theme, you will never understand the variations that can exist in the topic. And so when you start doing search for your article or your writing, then you need to have that scope in your mind to use the Boolean operators. It could be, I mean, like you said, and limits it, but or I think is a great idea. And if yes, you're right, there are lots of papers in one type or one, then you say not this, or whatever. So I think key to starting your literature review starts with your search and your search techniques. Now that's the skill. And you're right in saying that please practice it. Do not think that this PowerPoint will help you give the answers. Whatever you read in this PowerPoint, please practice it again and again and again and keep improving yourself till you get to a point where you say, I'm ready now to start working. So I think what I get to know is, may I say to all the people that you're very thankful for you that you're here, but please do not use the chat for unnecessary questions asking about certificates, links, or anything. Try to be more patient and let people sort of learn and use the chat only and only for questions, not for writing your addresses or not. And that takes a lot away. May I ask Gohar or Fatma, our educational developer, to come up with the questions? You said there were 4 questions.
Yes, ma'am, we are adding to that as well. I'll start with the questions. We have a question from Sabah Qayyum Lagari from and Rukhsar Khan. Uh, they ask that in disciplines with a slower research pace, older literature is often valued for its depth. Is it appropriate to cite such classical works?
Of course.
It is absolutely essential, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You cite them, and if you read them, you'll see that the content discussion is very different from the newer ones. But there's a but. Then you also search for the newest ones, and you make sure that that also features in your article, your paper, and things. But the older ones must be there. And even in a fast-paced growing thing, I would consider mentioning the older ones, showing I'm aware of them and this is, and then the bulk is on your most recent work. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, ma'am. Moving forward, we have a question from again from Sabah Qayyum. She says that what is grey literature and when is it important to include it in research?
Again, that depends on your topic, and grey literature is the kinds of things like brochures and white papers and things. It's something that is not always covered in your core databases, but there are sources, and that is when you go and you search on using a search tool like Google or any of the other Bing, any DuckDuckGo, any of the other tools, because it is things that is not covered in a journal article or in a book. That can be very important if you, for example, want to see documentation about a certain product. And sometimes, even if it is the manufacturer's documentation, it is not wrong. It is, yes, we say it's biased, but that is what you have on that product. Okay. So again, apply your mind, and grey literature can be extremely important. And if you want to know more, you can also look at early day books on reference works. It's not my field of expertise now, but in early days there were people discussing reference works in library science, dictionaries, grey literature, encyclopedias. Encyclopedias can be good sources for orientation, Wikipedia as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you, ma'am. Moving forward, we have Shafaq Maqsood from Sakhar IBA University is asking that when using Boolean operators like and or in databases, do we need to include all those words in the paper's titles as well using the same logic?
Remember, it search for the words that are in the article. In my article, I could have said leukemia, and not the word about cancer. So again, you must use them, and maybe you can't, if you come up with 20 synonyms, you can't fit them all out in once, depending on the system, then you do several searches. But you must be very mindful to pick words that are as close to your topic as well. In other words, real synonym starts off with that. But you only get, in other words, if you call Tina, am I going to respond? No, my name is Ina. So again, you must use exactly the right words to retrieve them. And I compare it often with calling a person. If you don't call them by their name, they were not going to respond. Anything else?
Yes, ma'am, we have a few more questions. Dr. Sayyeda Noreen asked that what should be the very first step when beginning a literature search on a new research topic?
I think that one sort of has almost been answered. If it's a very new one, I would sort of do some orientation reading. And I've on occasion used Wikipedia, and I've written an article. I was asked to do an article column on libraries going green. And okay, I don't know much about this. And I went to Wikipedia and I searched for this and then I identified my terms. And in that particular article, it was published in Library High Tech, I actually explained how I went about to get orientated to the terminology of this topic. And then use that. So first read about, and also again, then Google Scholar, search engines and so on are good to identify some ideas or so. And those are not going to be, and I need to repeat, necessarily the sources that you are going to cite when you give findings and so forth and the background, but the sources that orientate, that opens your mind to what is used in this thing, authors, and even if with a topic that you don't know anything about, dipping into Wikipedia, you get to know who are the key authors. And I've tried that a couple of times on things that I don't know much about.
Thank you,
Okay.
ma'am. Thank you. Moving forward, we have a question from Ramisha Mehtab. She asked that if after using advanced search strategies, we still find little to no literature, how can we be sure it's a genuine research gap and not just a missed keyword, database, or a perspective?
That is the most tricky one, okay. And in the early days, if you search the dialogue system and you paid and you search all databases, 550, 600 at some time, and you applied all the search techniques correctly and you didn't get anything, then you could be a little bit sure. But nowadays, I would always ask myself, did I search the right databases? And again, you are welcome to look up the University of Pretoria. Sometimes if you can just see, I don't know if you can see the list of databases, but sometimes you can for universities. I would go through them one by one. I would search as many as possible, okay? And I will search all of the other sources that I can think of. But the problem is then, problem lies with your choice of sources, very limited to Horizon, poor search terms, or incorrect use. So that is a very tricky one. And then I would suggest maybe also talking to people, experts. And whenever you write to an expert, I mean, that is, if it's somebody that you don't know, you need to be very mindful about how you phrase your request. But people are happy to help you, but it can also, I was on occasion asked to share my research on a certain topic, and I wrote back and said, I don't work on this topic. No, just send me all your articles. I mean, wow, that's not going to happen. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a lot of questions, but we are shortlisting and compiling them as well. We'll quickly move towards the last three sessions, last three questions. Farah Anwar asked that in multidisciplinary research and niche areas, it's hard to find literature. If we can't find relevant literature, how should we proceed with literature review?
That's a very good one, because then I would suggest that you take things in some of the concepts in the one discipline In other words, you combine less concepts at one time. And then you go to another group of databases and you combine less things, because then it means there is less published on this and you have to build your own little collection or so. So not precisely what you're looking for, but you have to break it down in concepts that are meaningful and try it with something that you are familiar with and see how this is working.
Thank you, ma'am. I think so you answered the next question as well. Moving on, Shah Zafar from Punjab University is asking if we are looking for a research idea within a specific field, example STEM, how can a literature search help identify a valuable topic? What criteria should we use to judge if an idea is worth pursuing?
Okay, that contains a number of things, and I think some of that will be discussed in other things, but I'm just thinking, and I think it is somewhere in the slides as well, go to the best journals on a topic, open them and go through the table of contents. Look for calls for papers, special editions. That will also give you ideas, and also go to conferences in the field. If you go to the conferences in the field, if you look at the call for papers, that will give you some of the cutting edge things that are important and that people who are experts think people should be able to talk about, or that people might have done recent research on that. So that is how I would approach it. But as for the other components of that, I can talk about that, but I'm not sure how much time there is, and that might be the part of other people's presentations.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll move towards the last question, which a number of people are asking. It's asked by Neela Marshad as well, from the University of Agriculture. They asked that when adding citations to a research document, how far back should we go? 5 years or 10 years? What's the best practice for determining the relevance of older sources?
The authority. I mean, I wanted to say you can even go back 100 years. You can really go back as far as possible. For example, the systems approach. I think von Bertalanffy wrote this book in 1956. That is the solid, okay, one. When people started with the original work. So you can go back a very long time. But it depends then on the voice, the reputation of that author. How do you know the reputation? You look in orientation sources like Wikipedia, you ask Chat GPT, and again, if you're a student in that field, you should have a good idea of who are the authorities. So again, I do have colleagues who say only the last 5. I absolutely do not agree with that. You have to go back, and there's no limit. It depends on your topic. If I think, for example, about adult education, andragogics, Malcolm Knowles is considered the father of that. So when was his first book published? And there are some new editions, and then you cite those as well, okay. But so that is my answer to don't shy away from older things. But it shouldn't be the bulk, the only thing, okay. You should give credit to the newer work as well, and that's why it's so ongoing and going back to citation searches as well.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That's it from my side. Over to you, Dr. Ruxana.
Yes. Ina, you have only talked about Chat GPT for your, looking at search options. Is there any specific apps that could be helpful for searching?
There are probably others as well. I haven't tried them out. As I said, I just dip into that when necessary, because for me, it is about expanding my mind. I'm not using it for all of the wonderful things it can be used. So, and again, I recently wrote an endorsement for the book by Professor Chowdhury. Yeah. And I think they are dealing with those things in more detail. And then also the book that I cited here, where I'm the co-author. There are a chapter on that as well, written by one of my colleagues, where you can really go. And I think maybe even ask something like ChatGPT, or there others might be giving you options.
I like your answer that it's better to sort of explore at this point in time rather than use a lot of AI, because the reading that it provides you helps you with your research itself. And I think gives you a wider spread of the land, like you say, Harry. So, Ina, what a delight to have you with us. And thank you so much. I see there are lots of satisfied participants if we go by the comments. And yes, we will share some of the questions and the Q&A in this video, so you will be able to get answers to your the questions that were asked. So thank you so much, Ina. Thanks again for being with us and spending your time and expertise. Goodbye.
No, thank you so much for having me. Okay, bye.
Again, no, keep in touch, Ina. Look forward to